Have you ever been in love with your best friend's mom? I mean, think about it. Really, think about it. If you have, you'll really relate to this story. If you haven't, just stay around. It's a good story. Paula is a fantastic book that I haven't read yet and just read today, and it was really, really good. I also want to say thank you so much for the support on the first video. Holy shit, I was not expecting that kind of support, but I am very appreciative of it. It made my week. And I don't plan on stopping this series soon, but I would love to hear about the books you like and you want me to read and go over. And I want to hear your theories on the books and what you think of them. Like, I want to hear your guys' opinion. But this book is written in a old English kind of vocabulary. So some of it I mispronounce and I stutter, which I apologize for if that makes it hard to listen to, some parts. But yeah, this is a great book. I think everybody that hasn't listened to it or read it will enjoy it. If you have, I'm sure you're like, ooh, what is he gonna think of the ending? Very, very good. Now, I hope you guys enjoy this story as much as I did, and let's get to it. Paula. I remember when I first heard that name, not long ago at all. It was at a Tails and Talos ball, a very fine estate west of Mir Corrupt, to which I and my fellow Mages Guild initiates had found ourselves unexpectedly invited. Truth be told, we needn't have been too surprised. There were very few and other noble families in Mir Corrupt. The region had its halcyon days as a resort for the wealthy far back in the Second Era, and on a reflection, it was the only appropriate to have sorcerers and wizards present at a supernatural holiday. Not that we were anything more than exotic students at a small non-exclusive charter house of the guild, but like I said, there was a paucity of other choices available. For close to a year, the only home I had known was the rather ramshackle if sprawling grounds of the Mir Corrupt Mages Guild. My only companions were my fellow initiates, most of which only tolerated me, and the masters whose bitterness at being a backwater guild prompted never-ending abuse. Immediately, the School of Illusion had attracted me. The magister who taught us recognized me as an apt pupil who loved not only the spells of the science, but their philosophical underminings. There was something about the idea of warping the imperceptible energies of light, sound, and mind that appealed to my nature. Not for me, the flashy schools of destruction and alteration, the holy schools of restoration and conjuration, the practical schools of alchemy and enchantment, or the chaotic school of mysticism. No, I was never so pleased as to take an ordinary object and by a little magic make it seem something other than what it was. I would have taken more imagination than I had to apply to that philosophy to my monotonous life. After the morning lessons, we were assigned tasks before our evening classes. Mine had been to clean out the study of a recently deceased resident of the guild, and categorized his clutter of spellbooks, charms. It was a lonely and tedious appointment, Magister. Tenoxius was an intervet collector of worthless junk, but I was reprimanded any time I threw something away of the least possible value. Gradually I learned enough to deliver each of his belongings to the appropriate department. Potions of healing to the magisters of restoration, books on physical phenomena to the magisters of alteration, herbs and minerals to the alchemists and soul gems, and bound items to the enchanter. After one delivery to the enchanters, I was leaving with my customary lack of appreciation when Magister Illither called me back. "Boy," said the portly old man, handing me back one item. "Destroy this." It was a small black disc covered with runes with a ring of red-orange gems, like bones circling in its periphery. "I'm sorry, Magister," I stammered. "I thought it was something you'd be interested in." "Take it to the Great Flame and destroy it," he barked, turning his back on me. You never brought it here. My interest was piqued because I knew the only thing that would make him react in such a way, necromancy. I went back to the Magister, Tenoxidus' chamber, and pored through his notes, looking for any reference to the disc. Unfortunately, most of these notes had been written in a strange code that I was powerless to decipher. I was so fascinated by the mystery that I nearly arrived late for my evening class in enchantment, taught by Magister Illither himself. For the next several weeks, I divided my time categorizing the general debris and making my deliveries, and researching the disc. I came to understand that my instinct was correct. The disc was a genuine necromantic artifact. Though I couldn't understand most of the Magister's notes, I determined that he thought it to be the means of resurrecting a loved one from the grave. Sadly, the time came when the chamber had been categorized and cleared, and I was given another assignment, assisting in the stables of the guild's menagerie. At least, finally, I was working with some of my fellow initiates and had the opportunity of meeting the common folk and nobles who came to the guild on various errands. Thus, I employed when we were all invited to the Tails and Talos ball. If the expected glamour of the evening were not enough, our hostess was ruptured to be a young, rich, unmarried orphan from Hammerfell. Only a month or two had she moved on to our desolate, wooded corner of the Imperial Province to reclaim an old family manor house and grounds. The initiates at the guild gossiped like old women about the mysterious young lady's past. What had happened to her parents? Why she had left or been driven from her homeland? Her name was Bentaniki, and that was all we knew. We wore our robes of initiation with pride, as well as we arrived for the ball. At the enormous marble foyer, a servant announced each of our names as if we were royalty, and we strutted into the midst of the reveliers with a great puffery. Of course, we were then promptly ignored by one and all. In essence, we were unimportant figures to lend some thickness to the ball, background characters. The important people pushed through us with perfect politeness. There was an old lady, Sharudiira, discussing diplomatic appointments to Balmora, with the Duke of Rimfarlin, an orc warlord, entertained a giggling princess with tales of and pillage. 3 of the guild magisters worried with 3 painfully thin noble spinsters about the haunting of Daggerfall. Intrigues at the imperial and various royal courts were analyzed, gently mocked, fretting over, toasted, dismissed, evaluated, mitigated, admonished. No one looked our way, even when we were right next to them. It was as if my skill at illusion had somehow rendered us all invisible. I took out my flagon out to the terrace. The moons were doubled, equally luminous in the sky, and in the enormous reflecting pool that stretched out into the garden, the white marble statuary lining the sides of the pool caught the fiery glow and seemed to burn like torches in the night. The sight was so otherworldly that I was mesmerized by it, and the strange red-guard figures immortalized into the stone. Our hostess had made her home there so recently that some of the sculptures were still wrapped in sheets that billowed and swayed in the gentle breeze. I don't know how long I stared before I realized I wasn't alone. She was so small and so dark, not only in her skin but in her clothing, that I nearly took her for a shadow. When she turned to me, I saw that she was very beautiful and young, not more than 17. "Are you our hostess?" I finally asked. "Yes," she smiled, blushing, "but I am ashamed to admit that I'm very bad at it. I should be inside with my new neighbors, but I think we have very little in common." It's been made abundantly clear that they hope I have nothing in common with them either, I laughed. When I'm a little higher than an initiate in the Mages Guild, they might see me more as an equal. "I don't understand the concept of equality in Cyrodiil yet," she frowned. "In my culture, you provided your worth, not just expected it. My parents both were great warriors, as I hope to be." Her eyes went out to the lawn, to the statues. Do the sculptures represent your parents? That's my father, Pararium, there, she said, gesturing to the life-size representation of a massively built man, unshamefully naked, gripping another warrior by the throat and preparing to decapitate him with an outstretched blade. It was clearly a realistic depiction. Parium's face was plain, even slightly ugly, with a low forehead, a mass of tangled hair, stubble on his cheeks, even a slight gap in his teeth, which no sculptor would surely have invented except to do justice to his model's true description. And your mother? I asked, pointing to a nearby statue of a proud, rather squat warrior woman in mantilla and scarf holding a child. Oh no, she laughed. That was my uncle's old nurse. My mother's statue still has a sheet over it. I don't know what prompted me to insist that we unveil the statue that she pointed to. In all likelihood, it was nothing but fate and selfish desire to continue the conversation. I was afraid that if I did not give her a project, she would feel the need to return to the party, and I would be alone again. At first, she was reluctant. She had not made up her mind whether the statues would suffer in the wet, sometimes cold Cyrodiilic climate. Perhaps all should be covered, she reasoned. It may be that she was merely making conversation, and was reluctant, that as I was, to end the standoff and be that much closer to having to return to the party. In a few minutes' time, we tore the tarp from the statue of Benetique's mother. That is when my life changed forevermore. She was an untamed spirit of nature, screaming in struggle with a misshapen monstrous figure in black marble. Her gorgeous long fingers were raking across the creature's face. The monster's talons gripped her right breast in a sort of caress that preferences a mortal wound. Its legs and hers wound around one another in a battle that was a dance. I felt annihilated. This but formidable woman was beautiful beyond all superficial standards. Whoever had sculpted it had somehow captured not only a face and a figure of a goddess, but her power and will. She was both tragic and triumphant. I fell instantly and fatally in love with her. I had not even noticed when Gallian, one of my fellow initiates who was leaving the party, came up behind us. Apparently I had whispered the word magnificent because I heard Benetique reply, as if miles away, "Yes, it is magnificent. That's why I was afraid of exposing it to the elements." Then I heard clearly, like a stone breaking water, "Galen, Mara preserve me, that must be Paula." "Then you heard of my mother?" asked Bentanique, turning his way. "I hail from Wayrest, practically on the border to Hammerfell. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't heard of your mother and her great heroism, ridding the land of that abominable beast. She died in that struggle, didn't she?" "Yes," said the girl, sadly. "But so too did the creature." For a moment we were all silent. I don't remember anything more of that night. Somehow I knew I was invited to dine the next evening, but my mind and heart has been entirely and forevermore arrested by the statue. I returned back to the guild, but my dreams fevered and brought me no rest. Everything seemed diffused by white light, except for one beautiful, fearsome woman. Paula. 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 The name burned in my heart. I found myself whispering in it. My studies, even when I tried to concentrate on something the magister was saying, my lips would silently purse to the voice, Paul, and a lightly tongue flick to form the la, as if I were kissing her spirit before me. It was madness in every way except that I knew it was madness. I knew I was in love. I knew she was a noble Redguard woman, a fierce warrior, more beautiful than the stars. I knew her young daughter, Benetique, had taken possession of a manor house near the guild, and that she liked me, perhaps was even infatuated. I knew Paula had fought a terrible beast and killed it. I knew Paula was dead. As I say, I knew it was madness, and by that I knew I could not be mad. But I also knew that I must return to Benetique's palace to see her statue of my beloved Paula engaged in that final horrible, fatal battle with the monster. Return I did, over and over again. Had Benetique been a different sort of noblewoman, more comfortable with her peers, I would not have had so many opportunities. In her innocence, unaware of my sick obsession, she welcomed my company. We would talk for hours, laughing every time we would take a walk to the reflecting pond, where I would always stop breathless before the sculpture of her mother. It's a marvelous tradition you have, preserving these figures of your ancestors at their finest moments, I said, feeling her curious eye on me, and the craftsmanship is without parallel. You wouldn't believe me, laughed the girl, but it was a bit of a scandal when my great-grandfather began the custom we Redguards hold in a great reverence for our families. But we are warriors, not artists. He hired a traveling artist to create the first statues, and everyone admired them until it was revealed that the artist was an elf, an Altmer from the Somerset Isle. Scandal! It was absolutely, Benetique nodded seriously. The idea that a pompous, wicked elf's hands had formed these figures of noble Redguard warriors was unthinkable, profane, irreverent, everything bad you can imagine. But my great-grandfather's heart was in the beauty of it. His philosophy of using the best to honor the best passed down to all of us. I would not have even considered having a lesser artist create the statues of my parents, even if it would have been more allegiant to my culture. They're all exquisite, I said. But you like the one of my mother most of all, she smiled. I see you look at it, even when you seem to be looking at the others. It is my favorite also. Would you tell me more about her? I asked, trying to keep my voice light and conversational. Oh, she would have said she was nothing extraordinary, but she was the girl that said, picking a flower from the garden. My father died when I was quite young, and she had so many roles to fill, but she did them all effortlessly. We have had a great many business interests, and she was brilliant at managing everything, certainly better than I am now. All it took was her smile, and everyone obeyed. And those that didn't paid dearly. She was very witty and charming, but a formidable force when the need arose for her to fight hundreds of battles. But I can never remember a moment of feeling neglected or unloved. I literally thought she was too strong for death. Stupid, I know, but when she went to battle, that horrible creature, that freak from a mad wizard's laboratory, I never even thought she would not return. She was kind to her friends and ruthless to her enemies. What more can one say about a woman than that? Poor Benetique's eyes teared up with remembrance. What sort of villain was I to goad her so? In order to satisfy my perverted longings, Sheogorath could never have conflicted a mortal man more than me. I found myself both weeping and filled with desire. Paula not only looked like a goddess, but from her daughter's story, she was one. That night, while undressing for bed, I rediscovered the black disc I had stolen from the Magister's Tenexius office weeks before. I had half forgotten about its existence, the mysterious necromantic artifact which the mage believed could resurrect a dead love. Almost by pure instinct, I found myself placing the disc on my heart and whispering, Paula. A momentary chill filled my chamber. My breath hung in the air in a mist before dissipating. Frightened, I dropped the disc. It took a moment before my reason returned, and with it, the inescapable conclusion. The artifact could fulfill my desire. Until the early morning hours, I tried to raise my mistress from the chains of oblivion, but it was no use. I was no necromancer. I entertained the thoughts of how to ask one of the magisters to help me, but I remembered how the magister, Ilither, had bid me to destroy it. They would expel me from the guild if I went to them and destroy the disc themselves, and with it, my only key to bringing my love to me. I was in my usual semi-torpid condition the next day in class, as Magister Ilither himself was lecturing on his specialty, the School of Enchantment. He was a dull speaker with a monotone voice, but suddenly I felt as if every shadow had left the room and I was in a palace of light. When the most persons think of my particular science, they think of the process of invention, the infusing of charms and spells into objects, the creation of a magical blade, perhaps, or a ring, But the skilled enchanter is also a catalyst. The same mind that can create something new can also provoke a greater power from something old. A ring that can generate warmth for a novice on the hands of such a talent can bake a forest black. The fat man chuckled. Not that I'm advocating that. Leave that for the school of destruction. That week, all the initiates were asked to choose a field of specialization. All were surprised when I turned my back on my old darling, the school of illusion. It seemed ridiculous to me that I had even entertained an affection for such superficial charms. All of my intellect was now focused on the school of enchantment, the means by which I could free the power of the disc. For months thereafter, I barely slept. A few hours a week I'd spend with Betanique, and my statue to give myself strength and inspiration. All the rest, while my time was spent with the Magister Elither or his assistants, learning everything I could about enchantment. They taught me how to taste the deepest levels of magicka within a stored object. A simple spell cast once, no matter how skillfully and no matter how spectacularly, this ephemeral of the present, what is and no more. Sighed Magister Elither. But placed in a home, it develops into almost living energy, maturing and ripening, so only its surface is touched when an unskilled hand wields it. You must consider yourself a miner, digging deeper to pull forth the very heart of gold. Every night when the laboratory closed, I practiced what I had learned. I could feel my power grow, and with it the power of the disc, whispering, "Paula." I delved into the artifact, feeling every slight nick that marked runes and every facet of the gemstones. At times I was so close to her I felt hands touching mine. But something dark and bestial, the reality of death, I suppose, would always break across the dawning of my dream. With it came an overwhelming rotting odor, which the initiates in the chambers next to mine began to complain about. Something must have crawled into the floorboards and died, I offered lamely. Magister Elither praised my scholarship, and allowed me to use his laboratory after hours to further my studies. Yet no matter what I learned, Paula seemed scarcely closer. One night, it all ended. I was swaying in a deep ecstasy, moaning her name, the disc bruising my chest when a sudden flash through the window broke my concentration. A tempest of furious rain roared over near Kurup. When I went to close the shutters, and when I returned to my table, I found that the disc had been shattered. I broke into a hysterical sob and laughter. It was too much for my fragile mind to bear such a loss after so much time and study. The next day and the day after, I spent in my bed burning with a fever. Had I not been a mage's guild with so many healers, I likely would have died, as it was provided an excellent study for the budding young scholars. When at last I was well enough to walk, I went to visit Betanique. She was charming as always, never once commenting on my appearance, which must have been ghostly. Finally, I gave her a reason to worry when I politely but firmly declined to walk with her along the reflecting pool. "But you love looking at the statuary," she exclaimed. I felt that I owed her the truth and much more. "Dear lady, I love more than the statuary. I love your mother. She is all I've been able to think about for months now. Ever since you and I first removed the tarp from that blessed sculpture. I don't know what you think of me now, but I have been obsessed with learning how to bring her back from the dead." Betanique stared at me, eyes wide. Finally she spoke. "I think you need to leave now. I don't know if this is just a terrible jest. Believe me, I wish it were. You see, I failed. I don't know why. It could not have been that my love wasn't strong enough, because no man has had a stronger love. Perhaps my skills as an enchanter are not masterful, but it wasn't from any lack of study. I could feel my voice rise, and I knew I was beginning to rant, but I could not hold back. Perhaps the fault lay in that your mother never met me. But I think only the caster's love is taken into account in the necromantic spell. I don't know what it was. Maybe that horrible creature, the monster that killed her, cast some sort of curse on her with its dying breath. I failed, and I don't know why." With a surprising burst of speed and strength, for so small a lady. Benetique shoved herself against me. She screamed, "Get out," and I fled out the door. Before she slammed the door shut, I offered my pathetic apology. "I'm so sorry, Benetique. But consider that I wanted to bring your mother back to you. It's madness, I know, but there is only one thing that's certain in my life, and that's that I love Paula." The door was nearly shut, but the girl opened it to crack, to ask tremulously, "You love whom?" "Paula," I cried out to the gods. "My mother," she whispered angrily, "was named Zarless. Paula was the monster." I stared at the closed door, for Mara knows how much time, and then began the long walk back to the Mages Guild. My memory searched the minute to the tales and Talos night, so long ago, when I first beheld the statue and first heard the name of my love. That Breton initiate, Gellin, had spoken. He was behind me. He was recognizing the beast, and not the lady. I turned to the lonely bend that intersected with the outskirts of Mir Corrupt, and a large shadow rose from the ground where I had been sitting, waiting for me. "Paula," I groaned. "Paula." "Kiss me," it howled. And that brings my story up to the present moment. Love is red, like blood. Okay, so that was Paula. Very good book. One of the longest Skyrim books I've read. The twist at the end that Paula was the monster, not the mother, actually got me. I was like, holy shit. Bro, it was actually more insane than I thought. But the only monster that I can think of is the Hunger Daedra. Just from the brief description we got of the monster, but then again, this is probably a made-up tale. I mean, Mir Corrupt doesn't even exist anymore, like, so it's hard to tell, but that was a really good story. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the story, and I got a little frustrated with the wording of some of the book, like, like, I can't explain it. I was getting a little frustrated from, like, the wording, some of the words, just kind of like the old English. I was stuttering a lot, as, I mean, you heard that, and I apologize. But that was a really good book. I enjoyed that story a lot. If you did, like and subscribe would be awesome, but of course you don't have to do it. It's up to you. But I would like to hear some of your favorite books, like I said in the beginning. Yeah. Anyways, I appreciate you guys for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day, everybody.